The fence exploded in a shower of splintered wood as Grant Brooks galloped into the edge of town, his horse's hooves throwing dust into the merciless Idaho sun. It was 1885, and the frontier had teeth. His storm-gray eyes locked onto a solitary figure standing amid a dozen dying cattle. Angela Watson, 55 years old, her weathered hands gripping a pitchfork like a spear against the world. The herd's ribs pressed through their hides, and the earth beneath them was cracked and bleeding. Grant pulled his horse to a halt 10 feet away. The wind caught his words before they reached her. "I know what you're hiding," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "And I know what it's worth." Angela's jaw tightened. She didn't flinch, didn't step back. "Then you know more than you should, Brooks." He dismounted slowly, his boots hitting the ground with finality. "I'm not here to take it from you. I'm here to make you an offer." The dying cattle moaned behind her, a chorus of desperation. Grant's eyes never left hers. "1 week," he said. "Work with me for 1 week, and I'll give you half of everything I find. Refuse, and we both lose what's left." Angela stared at him, reading the exhaustion etched into his young face, the desperation that mirrored her own. If you've ever felt the crushing weight of a choice you can't afford to make wrong, staying with us now is the only way to see how this gamble ends. Tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? But before Angela could answer, a gunshot split the air, and both of them hit the ground. Who fired? Grant Brooks had been 25 when his ranch sprawled across 300 acres of Idaho's richest grazing land. Cattle grazed fat and content. Water flowed from a spring that never ran dry. He'd inherited it from his father, and he'd sworn to make it legendary. Then the drought came. 3 years of relentless sun turned the grass to dust, and the spring to a memory. His cattle died by the dozens, his debts piled higher than the corpses he burned. The bank circled like vultures, and his crew abandoned him one by one, until only the land remained, and even that was slipping through his fingers. Now, at 28, Grant was a ghost, haunting his own legacy. His clothes hung loose on a frame that had forgotten how to rest. His hands shook when he thought no one was watching. The town called him the Broken Rancher, and he'd stopped arguing. But 3 days ago, a drunk cowhand had whispered a secret in the saloon. Angela Watson's dead husband had buried something on her land before he died. A map, a claim, something worth killing for. Grant had ridden out at dawn, desperation fueling every mile. He found Angela standing in the ruins of her own dream, and he saw himself reflected in her eyes, stubborn, exhausted, refusing to surrender. The gunshot still echoed in his ears as he crawled toward her through the dirt. "You hit?" he gasped. Angela shook her head, her eyes scanning the ridgeline. "Not yet." Another shot rang out, closer this time. Angela Watson had been 19 when she married Thomas Watson, a farmer with more hope than sense. They'd carved a life from the Idaho soil, 200 acres of sweat and prayer. No children came, but they'd had each other, and that had been enough. Then Thomas died, a fever that burned him hollow in 4 days. She was 53, alone, and the town looked at her like she was already a grave waiting to be filled. The younger widows remarried within months, but Angela was too old, too weathered, too used up. The whispers followed her through the general store. What's she still doing here? Why doesn't she just sell and disappear? She refused to disappear. She worked the land herself, though her back screamed with every shovelful of dirt. She tended the dying herd, though everyone said it was pointless. She kept Thomas's secrets locked in her chest, because that was the only thing she had left that was truly hers. The rumor about the heirloom had started 6 months ago, some drunken speculation in the saloon that had grown teeth. Now strangers watched her home. The sheriff asked too many questions, and a cattle baron named Dalton Reeves had offered to take the burden off her hands 3 times, each offer wrapped in a smile that promised violence. Grant Brooks was just another desperate man chasing a ghost. But when the 3rd shot shattered the window of her dying barn, and Grant threw himself over her without hesitation, she realized he might be different. "Run," he hissed. She grabbed his arm. "Not without the ledger." His eyes widened. "You know where it is?" The barn was already burning. Flames licked up the dry wood like a living thing, hungry and inevitable. Smoke poured through the gaps in the walls, turning the air into poison. Angela and Grant stumbled through the entrance, coughing, eyes streaming. "Where?" Grant shouted over the roar of the fire. Angela pointed toward the back corner, where a stack of rotting hay bales leaned against the wall. "Under there. Thomas buried it the night before he died." Grant didn't hesitate. He dove into the smoke, his silhouette swallowed by the inferno. Angela followed, her lungs burning, her heart pounding against her ribs. They threw the bales aside with raw desperation, and there, buried 3 feet down in a rusted metal box, was the ledger. Grant yanked it free, just as a support beam cracked overhead. The ceiling was coming down. He grabbed Angela's wrist and ran. They burst through the barn door as the structure collapsed behind them in an explosion of sparks and ash. They hit the ground hard, gasping for air, the ledger clutched between them. Angela opened it with trembling hands. Inside were pages of neat handwriting, accounts, debts, and a single line circled in red. North Ridge, 30 paces from the lightning tree. Water. Grant stared at it, then at Angela. "Your husband found a spring." "And the bank doesn't know," Angela whispered. Hoofbeats thundered in the distance. The sheriff was coming. "We have to move," Grant said. "Now." But Angela's eyes were locked on the horizon, where a line of riders appeared, led by Dalton Reeves himself. "Too late," she breathed. The storm hit like the fist of God. Lightning split the sky, and thunder shook the earth as Grant and Angela ran for the only shelter left, the old homestead's cramped attic. Rain turned the ground to mud, swallowing their footprints, erasing their trail. They climbed the ladder and slammed the trapdoor shut, just as Dalton Reeves and his men rode into the yard below. Angela pressed her ear to the floor, listening to the muffled shouts and curses as the riders searched the ruins. Grant sat beside her, the ledger open in his lap, his finger tracing the faded ink. "If this spring is real," he said quietly, "it changes everything. My debts, your land, all of it." Angela's hands trembled. "Thomas told me, the night he died, that he'd found something. He said it would keep me safe, but he died before he could show me." "He kept you safe," Grant said, his voice fierce. "He gave you the only weapon that matters. Hope." The rain pounded the roof like drumbeats. Below, Dalton's voice rose above the storm. "Burn what's left. If they're hiding here, smoke them out." Angela's breath caught. "They're going to kill us." Grant met her eyes, and in that moment, she saw the truth. He was just as terrified as she was, but he didn't look away. "Then we go down fighting," he said. "If you've ever felt the crushing weight of being invisible, of being told your time has passed, staying with us now is the only way to see how courage rewrites the ending. Tell us where you're watching from, and let this truth live beyond tonight." Below them, the first torch was lit. The sheriff's voice cut through the storm like a knife. "Reeves, stand down. This is official business now." Dalton Reeves turned in his saddle, rain streaming off his hat, his face twisted with rage. "Official? She's hiding on stolen land, and you know it." "That's for a judge to decide," the sheriff said, his hand resting on his gun. "Not you." Angela and Grant watched from the attic as the standoff unfolded below. 4 of the sheriff's men surrounded Dalton's crew, rifles aimed and ready. The tension was a living wire, one spark away from bloodshed. "We have a warrant," the sheriff continued, "for the ledger Thomas Watson left behind. It's evidence in a land dispute filed by the bank." Angela's stomach dropped. "They know." Grant's jaw tightened. Someone told them. "Watson's widow and anyone harboring her have 24 hours to surrender it," the sheriff called out. "After that, we come in by force." Dalton laughed, cold and vicious. "You think they'll last 24 hours? My boys are hungry, Sheriff, and patience ain't their virtue." The sheriff's eyes narrowed. "Try me, Reeves." For a long moment, no one moved. Then Dalton spat into the mud and wheeled his horse around. 24 hours, he said. "Then it's open season." The riders vanished into the storm. The sheriff and his men remained, circling the property like wolves waiting for the kill. Grant turned to Angela. "We can't stay here." "Then where?" she whispered. A new voice echoed from below, familiar, rough, dangerous. "Brooks, I know you're in there." Grant's face went white. "It's my old crew," he breathed. "They've come for their share." 3 men stood in the mud below, rain-soaked and grinning like wolves. Angela recognized the one in front. Silas Brennan, Grant's former foreman, a man with a reputation for violence and a smile that promised nothing but pain. "Heard you found something valuable, boss," Silas called up. "Thought we'd come collect what's owed." Grant's hands curled into fists. "I don't owe you anything, Silas. You walked when the ranch went under." "And you survived," Silas shot back, "which means you found a way. Now we want in." Angela grabbed Grant's arm. "They'll kill us for it." "I know," Grant said, his voice hollow. Silas's grin widened. "We're not unreasonable, Brooks. Give us half of whatever that ledger leads to, and we'll disappear. Refuse, and we'll take it all, and leave you both in the dirt." Grant stood slowly, his shadow falling across the attic floor. "You want half of nothing? Because that's all we've got right now. A promise of water that might not even exist." "Then prove it don't exist," Silas said. "Take us to the site. We'll dig together. If there's nothing, we walk. If there's something, we split it fair." Angela's mind raced. "It's a trap." "I know," Grant said again, "but what choice do we have?" Below, one of Silas's men cocked his rifle. The sound was unmistakable. "You've got 10 seconds, Brooks," Silas said. "Then we start shooting." Grant looked at Angela, his eyes searching hers for an answer neither of them had. 5 seconds. Angela made the decision. She stood, throwing open the attic window. "We'll take you," she shouted. "But only Grant and I do the digging. You watch from a distance." Silas laughed. "Deal." But as they climbed down, Angela whispered to Grant, "We're going to die out there." "I know," he said for the 3rd time. And yet, he took her hand. The north ridge rose like a broken tooth against the storm-dark sky. Lightning illuminated the twisted remains of the lightning tree, a blackened skeleton clawing at the heavens. 30 paces from its base, Angela and Grant began to dig. Silas and his men watched from 20 yards back, rifles ready, eyes hungry. The sheriff's posse waited on the opposite ridge, a silent audience to the madness unfolding below. The ground was hard, unforgiving. Every shovelful felt like lifting stone. Angela's hands bled, but she didn't stop. Grant's breathing came in ragged gasps, but he didn't slow. 10 feet down, their shovels hit something solid. There, Angela breathed. Grant dropped to his knees, clawing at the dirt with his bare hands. Beneath the mud, a stone cap appeared, ancient, carved, unmistakable. He pried it loose. Water surged up from below, cold and clear, pooling around their knees, soaking into the parched earth like a benediction. The spring was real. Silas let out a whoop of triumph. "We're rich." But Grant didn't celebrate. He stared down into the water, his face stricken. "There's something else,"